Ok, vamos então à nossa segunda parte. Professor titular David Andrews. David é professor titular de Estudos da Cultura Física do Departamento de Kinesiologia da Universidade de Maryland. Ele tem trabalhado e seus interesses de pesquisa envolvem análise crítica do esporte, exame de vários aspectos da performance encarnada, com foco especial na maneira como elas são organizadas e representadas, além de discussões relativas às questões sobre globalização, corporativismo, comercialização e neoliberalismo. Então, com vocês,
Thank you. You're going to have to bear with me because my voice doesn't carry very well, I don't think. So if you can't hear me, I apologise. Also, I've got a pointer, a changer, and I like to read from my notes. So motor control or learning or whatever it is may not be my strong point. Before I go any further, I'd like to thank everyone here for the invite, especially Edison, Yara, Marcus, Lewis and Emerson. And I'd just like to point out that I think the Ephysis project is innovative, insightful, and something that, to my knowledge, was never done in the US context. I'm English, okay? I'm not American. I'm an interloper into the American scene, so I can give you an unbiased viewpoint of what is going on in the American kinesiology kind of scene. However, I don't think the Ephysis discussion was ever had. It seems like it was much more haphazard in the way that kinesiology has emerged within the US context. And what I'm going to do, the last part of this talks about my research. There's 110 slides. I'm not going to get to that. I should throw it away, yes. And I'm going to just kind of give you a flavour. The work I do is in a field that we call physical cultural studies. And I won't be able to get to much of that, but I want to do a physical cultural studies contextualising of what I think American kinesiology is. And I'll start off, if you like, and I apologise, I wish I'd have chosen different colours, with these here. Oh, no, wrong way. And, you know, a number of us, Brian including, was talking about logos. And I think the logo is, if you like, the symbol of everything that is wrong with the American university. Simply because it becomes a brand value. It's something that you buy into. It's a commodity. So students now recognise themselves as consumers first and foremost, and they're buying a product. And oftentimes the product is a grade. And they feel that they're paying for that grade. They're not paying for learning, they're paying for the A. So I think we sometimes, you know, and I don't want to go too far into that debate because Benoit's looking at me like I'm... but the logo typifies the commodification and corporatisation of the American university. And if there's anything that you can pick up on, it's perhaps where we've gone right, but definitely I think where we've gone wrong as well. But to counter this, just because the power lies in the corporation, we can counter things, I think, and this is what we've tried to do in physical cultural studies. We came up with our own logo here, and we did it on purpose. I don't know, everybody hates it in my department, you know. My dean can't stand to see it, and the more I do it, it's an anti-logo, if you like. It's supposed to make people think, what are those stars? What's that trying to represent? What is physical cultural studies about? If you like, it's an anti-corporatist logo. So it's a critique. I never say this in faculty meetings, of course, but it's an implicit critique of the institution of which it's a part. And I think that is important, because I think that's what we have lost in kinesiology, or in human movement science, as Brian says. Social science is bereft. It's not non-existent in Fry in Norway. We've lost the critique of ourselves as a field. And so we've just ploughed on a particular furrow, which I think is a dangerous and narrow furrow. So, that's, you know, and my title is Rolling With It, and I'll explain why that is the case. The Perils of Neoliberal Kinesiology. And a lot of the work that I do is using neoliberal theory to critique and try and understand physical culture and power as it's related to particular forms of embodiment, disadvantage as it's related to particular forms of embodiment. And and I thought, and I don't know where we are in Brazil, or where you are in Brazil in terms of neoliberal politics. Sometimes we say we're post-neoliberal. Others say that Lula was kind of a neo-populist neoliberal. And so it's a very complicated issue, but you can see perhaps where some of these themes and issues, maybe not here now, or maybe they are, but maybe it's almost a prophetic vision I'm offering you, and it's not necessarily a good one. Anyway, I don't know what I'll get to. We'll see. I'm going to go for 45 minutes, and we'll see where we are at the end, and hopefully we'll get a few questions. Now, what I want to talk about very briefly is neoliberalism, because I'm doing a lecture to 200 undergrads next week on neoliberalism and physical culture in America, and part of their, they have to. What's neoliberalism? They're living the neoliberal condition. They've got no idea what it is. They've been brought up in a neoliberal world, and they're like, they haven't got any idea of the world in which we live. And so what I think we need to do within kinesiology is to quote Ian Forster in Howard's End, and I'm not a great literary, it's the only literary reference I'll have, is only connect. We need to connect and not live in fragments anymore. Because I think what we do in kinesiology is we're in a little fragmented world. And, that's not only separate from the university, but within its little world, it's separate from the various parts. I don't know about here, but in my university, the three main research areas of kinesiology, I know their names, and I know how many kids they've got. What they do, no clue. They think I'm just a nutter that, is in the office down there. We don't have any interaction. We're fragmented internally. And we could go on about that, and I think Brian, demonstrated the perils of that fragmentation to some degree if you don't, get together. And I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the fragmentation between kinesiology and the rest of society. Because I think, I don't know if you can see this, if we look at, this is the internal fragmentation, and I don't think these, they may have overlapped somewhat, but I've kept them separate on purpose to make a point. And I'm trying to argue that there's a fragmentation between this, kinesiology, and this. We operate within kinesiology, even sociologists, I think, oftentimes, as if we're divorced from the rest of society. As if, there is a very, not a very close or understandable relationship between the two. And what I'm suggesting that we need to do is recognise kinesiology as a dialectic in the true sense of the word. Kinesiology at any moment in time, and I think again Brian's talk demonstrated the evolution of this, is not only a product of the society in which it is, but, and this is what we don't recognise, surely we must believe that kinesiology can contribute at the same time to the ongoing evolution and development of that society. We're not just a reflection of what's going on in society. As an academic field, as a pedagogical movement, surely we can, go out until the dialectic can be in place, truly. If I didn't think that, well, we might as well all go home and eat bonbons, Anyway, and here we have the great man and the less great man. No, I shouldn't say that. Carlos Tevez in England, he's not the greatest. I should say Fulham, my team, just signed Brian Ruiz, the Costa Rican from FC20. No, you don't care, you don't know. Anyway, I'm happy. The point of this, I was looking through Corinthians. I thought we were going to a Corinthians game, but in fact we're going to São Paulo, Fluminense tonight. But I was looking through the Corinthians website in English, and it's got all these endorsements by these famous people, including Lula, on the website saying it's not a team, it's a religion, blah blah blah, and all this. But I thought this was an interesting one, and I'm going to use it anyway. Corinthians does not have fans; it has militants. I don't know in the context of Corinthians what that really means. But my point is, and I'm using it, is this. In kinesiology in the US, we don't have militants. I think we should do. I think kinesiology, given the state of health, in America, we should be militant. We should be standing up going, you're not listening to us. And this is this is a first world country that in many places has third world health or developing world health kind of outcomes for many people. In the city I live, in the neighbourhood I live in, the life expectancy is 84, 83. Across the road, it drops down to about 62. You go 50 yards, and you're losing virtually 20 years of life. Now, that's in America, the greatest, the citadel on the... What is really going on? Surely we should be militant and saying, we have a role to play in addressing that and other issues, I suggest, through physical activity. But no, we don't. We are too wrapped up in legitimising ourselves as a field, and this is characterised by this stuff. And I'm part of this. I'm part of the problem, not part of the solution. These are the national rankings for doctoral programmes in kinesiology. Their good old Mary is third, and all my head of department's pumping at me going, we've got to get first, come on, what are we going to do? What have we got to do in this department to get to number one? Not, what knowledge do we need to generate to contribute to improving and having an impact on society more broadly? No. Let's kind of work out, what are the metrics? Let's go for them. Now, that's kind of the tail wagging the dog, is it not? But I think that's typical. And, more importantly, I would suggest that in doing so, in blindly following this particular mantra, we're doing this. And I don't think all kinesiologists are raving, Milton Friedmans and advocates of a neoliberal order. Some of them might be true. I'm not saying they all are, but unwittingly, most of them, in the very practices of what they do in trying to establish themselves and their careers, are, I would say, reproducing this iniquitous neoliberal order. Now, if you think I'm being a bit polemic, well, I am, I'm throwing that out there, like how he was yesterday, for you to think. But it is what I think. And it is a role, I think, that we need to play, is to step up and look at those relationships and do something about it. Anyway, so my argument is we're sleepwalking through the neoliberal revolution. Sleepwalking, I was trying to get a movement metaphor in. Anyway, and it's gone on, and we've just blindly done it. I started my graduate work in 1987, and there was some brilliant work being done by Alan Ingham on neoliberalism and physical activity and health. I read it, I would guess, maybe 1998. Where's the gap? What's wrong with, why are we not being attuned to, what's happening in our society, much quicker? We're not, because we're fragmented, there's that gap. Anyway, I suppose, what we need to do then, really briefly, I think, is think about what neoliberalism is. And I don't want to give you I'm not a political scientist, so I'll give you a particular viewpoint. And the key thing about it, I think, and this is my argument, you can't see these people, but from Margaret Thatcher to Ray Kroc to Walt Disney to Henry Ford to Milton Friedman and Theodore Schultz playing tennis. They're not tennis players, they're neoliberal economists from the Chicago School. All these people that we don't, Friedrich Hayek, Rudy Giuliani. These are the, I was going to say the avatars, not avatars. I'm not sure what an avatar is. These are the embodiments, as I say, the architects, the agents of neoliberalism. And I think these people have shaped the way we, in kinesiology in America, do what we do. Not directly, but indirectly. They're the context in which, out of which, kinesiology in its present form has emerged. And I use the phrase rolling with it, another movement metaphor, I suppose, because this comes out of urban studies. And a lot of what I do is focused on Baltimore, the urban environment. And in urban studies, these two, they took some great work done on understanding neoliberalism. And so roll with it. There's three ways that Kell and Peck and Tickle have thought about it. And this is almost like, what's it called? Periodization of neoliberalism. The first one, rollback neoliberalism. And I don't know when this happened, or if it's happened in Brazil, you know, but maybe you can think about it. Rollback neoliberalism is where the moment in which the general consensus about social welfare reform and investment in social welfare was totally undermined and literally was rolled back. So that time when public investment into public services and programming became an issue that was no longer apropos for the moment. It typified the Reagan and Thatcher eras in America and Britain. And I don't know if you had. Have you had that period yet, where public spending was cut and it was literally rolled back? Yeah. What decade was it in?
I mean, during the former president left, before Lula.
Prior to Lula.
Well, this is what I think. I don't know if my colleagues agree with that.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting, yeah. Well,
they don't say anything. So.
Anyway, what replaced it was many things, many processes. But two of them were marketisation, the deference not to social welfare, but to the rhythms and routines and regimes of the marketplace. And what was linked to that was a deregulation, the privatisation of previously public services and institutions. You must have had that. Well, I don't know. But, so that's the 1980s. The 1990s was kind of a roll out. So we're going to roll back. We're going to bring back this public kind of social welfare consensus, social welfare agenda. But what followed it in the 90s, you know, this is very loose periodization, was this broadening of this neoliberal agenda, and you know, this deregulation and privatisation going into ever more different parts of life, including education, including the police, including the military. You know, when you look at the American military and you think, well, they're in Iraq, who are all these Blackwater and I can't remember, these other forms of private services that are military, you know, private agencies that are doing a lot of the jobs that I'm not advocating any military incursion, but it's been privatised every bit as much as all other forms of life have been privatised. And so, again, we're going back to the marketplace. You know, we're going back to the market, and here, this is the key thing I think you need to think about. This is the key thing where it links to kinesiology, is this notion of individualism or individualization, and I can never say this word, responsibilitization, because the market regimes, I mean, what freedoms do you have within a neoliberal marketplace? What freedoms are you given? How is freedom understood within a neoliberal order? Freedom to do what?
To choose among different brands.
To choose as a consumer. It's not freedom of political will, it's freedom as a... We're speaking on the same, the rest of them can go home, right? You know, this is what it is. So it gets reduced, everything gets reduced, not kind of social welfare agenda, it's about providing the resources and the ability of the individual to consume or take advantage of a private market-driven economy that's going to give them the opportunity to consume. Now, that's the rhetoric. It sounds really good. Everyone's got the chance. I can go and get some Nikes or some Pumas or some Adidas. It's up to me. Yeah.
Could you have the chance of not to choose?
Sorry?
Could you have the chance of not choosing?
You could have the chance of not choosing, yes, but And you know, we have the great don't buy days, you know, that fail dismally, the World Don't Consume Day. So on this day, April the 5th, you don't buy anything, and the whole economic system will fall flat. But of course nobody does, because the system is based around individual acquisition, private, you know, market-driven, individually oriented senses of self. Now, in some countries, the sense of a collective belonging to the social grouping has been separated by this, you know, adherence to a kind of a rampant individualism. Now, the problem, I guess, with it is, it's a good point, is this. Well, as this kind of goes on, it becomes unquestioned. Maybe some of you have never, this is a system that you've been brought up in, and you've never questioned it. It becomes, if you like, the natural and unquestioned way of life under capitalism. That is the way it is. That's why it's the hegemon. We don't question it. We take it for granted, and it's great, because I can do, you know, I can get what I want. I'm benefiting from it. Why shouldn't I love it? Now, what's wrong with it is that, here, because there's a related, and Howard, you were talking about this yesterday, the moralistic agenda, the punitive agenda that's often linked to people who don't follow the norms of consumption. And one of the norms of consumption, and this is where I kind of, well, anyway, we've all got body issues. Why have we got body issues? Because the consumer market-driven culture tells you I should have a six-pack. Now I've got a very large one-pack, thank you. You know, but the related moralistic agenda is, if you haven't got it, it's your fault for not getting it. If you're not fit, if you haven't got the right shoes, if you haven't got, I don't know, the right house, the right type of car, you've been given every consumer opportunity to get it, and you haven't been, quote unquote, responsible enough to work within the system to benefit from it. Now that can go from the consumption of a car through to the consumption of a fit and quote unquote healthy body. So I'm trying to get you to see how kinesiology, if you like, and this is the end point I'm going to get to, is complicit, unknowingly I would add, in reinforcing that this individualism and the moralistic and punitive individualism, because it does, as it is largely understood in many places, it doesn't take into account the social and cultural context in which physical activity or inactivity takes place. It's like, what's Barack Obama's wife's name? I can never remember. Michelle Obama. It's let's move. This is her, you know, come on, let's move. That's her mantra, that's her advertising campaign to get kids active. Let's move. And if you think about it, she's saying, you know, we could, and in the advert she says, we can all get out and be healthy and fit. Well, can we? Now, some people have significantly more barriers to be able to do that than others. If you lived in certain parts of Baltimore, you're not going out jogging in your streets, and you're not going to the local, you know, health club, because there isn't one. So, you know, let's move should be, if you like, let us move. Give us a society in which we're able to move. Not let's move, apostrophe S. So, that's where I'm going with this, if you get my drift. And I haven't got time to talk about these. But these, if you like, are the processes that are linked with the neoliberal revolution. And if you like, these are clumped together in these processes linked to normalising the corporate way of life, the commodified, the branded existences that we live. And, you know, this is it seditious? Is that the word? To do that? I don't know. I'm not an American citizen, so I can do that.
Not anymore.
Yeah. It's on camera though. Don't
I think your green card is...
Oh yeah, my green card, yeah. That's right, I'll move on from there. But look at these, the brands that drive our lives. Quite literally. Figuratively and literally, they drive our lives. You know, and we are expected to buy into them, quite literally. And then we have this consumer, you know, I shop therefore I am. It's a real kind of glib way of characterising existence, but to some degree the individualisation derives from that, it's all linked to this. Forms of governmentality, forms of governing and conduct based on your expectations of being a responsible individual, a responsible consumer. This is, quite cleverly done. And if you're not, and Louis Quant, Benoit, is he famous in France?
Maybe.
He's a Bourdieu, one of Bourdieu's kind of, his work, he's at Berkeley in California. It's great stuff because it shows how what goes hand in hand with increased consumer choice and responsibilitization is this: the criminalization of those who don't, those who don't fit that mould of being the responsible consumer citizen get moved on. Now, I put Rudy Giuliani up there, and Rudy Giuliani is a classic figure in that regard. He's known for cleaning up New York, is he not? And cleaning up New York really means creating a privatised, corporatised, commercial world. It's a consumer heaven, a consumption heaven to some degree, but he's also known for the criminalisation of the poor. If you're not part of that, you're out in the streets. I mean, I walked today past a number of homeless people on Pell Easter Avenue. They wouldn't be there, even in the main avenue in Baltimore. They'd be moved on. They wouldn't be, we don't want to see them. And if they wouldn't be incarcerated, then they'd be moved somewhere else, quote unquote, where they belong. So, my argument is that neoliberalism, as differently manifest in different places and different times and in different ways, has become that, a new planetary vulgate, which is a kind of a commonly accepted order, if you like. And it is a hegemonic because we don't question it. Going the wrong way. So where does this fit in? The neoliberal university. I went to Illinois in '87, and I think we were in the midst of all this. But since kind of going to the University of Memphis, then the University of Maryland, I think I've lived through the intensifying, hyper kind of corporatization of the university. And this, I think we can see these processes, and I've kind of concentrated on these ones here, manifesting themselves in the university. I don't see it so much as I go around this university. I bought my wife two brooches or necklaces in the the side plate. They were 45 real. In my place, they'd have been branded Bush, and 5 or 6 times that value. I couldn't believe it. I didn't get a sense that here I was being, commercialised in that regard. And let's face it. In America, I don't know about here, and this is going to happen to you. I'll bet you any money. You're going to get administrators who are going to go on courses about how to create the corporate university, and we're all going, oh my God, no, don't do that. But this is the future potentially. Because they're going to say it's a rational driven, economic order. We need to kind of make sure that this is a business first and foremost. And that's what will happen to you. So I think we've got roll with it universities. Deans, head of departments, bleating on about, it's the mantra is, I'll show this later, you heard this, you do more with less. Is that more with less? That's what you're told. In French, do you have that one? Yeah, you do more with less. But in fact, my argument is, ultimately, you do less with less. Because you can't do more with less. So something's got to give in this rationalised system. And here you go, all right? And there's lots of work being done on this, the spectacularisation of the American campus. This is the university, and I would even say some faculty have rebelled against this. This is our logo. Testudo the turtle, fear the turtle, And we're going, well, we've got Nobel Prize winners here, but fear the turtle, go Terps. Are we an educational institution, or are we a home for a middling basketball and a less than middling American football team? And, you have to wonder. And, you're commodified in this way. Students' experiences are I mean, I drove past your new student blocks here. Great, they look fantastic, the new ones. But in America, I bet you they'd walk into there and go, I'm not staying there. No way. They are consumers, and they better be treated as, you know, like they're on Beverly Hills 90210. You know? That's showing my age there. I mean, anyway, and they've given, you know, they pay top dollar and they want it, you know, in every way, shape or form. Now, of course, you want a place where you can live in that's reasonable, it's safe and it's nice. But to take it as if it's a 3-4 star hotel, I think it's taking it a little bit far. And these are the images we're given in terms of consumption. And George Ritzer, who's a guy at Maryland in sociology and who I've done a fair bit of work with, as he says, when the marketplace takes over, we surrender everything that has made education distinctive. It's about learning, isn't it? It's not about getting, you know, a tattoo of testudo and, you know, I don't know what American are. I don't know what they do, but that's what is lost, the learning. And I'm not saying that there, you know, education and books and learning and pedagogy is the single, or formal pedagogy is the single kind of role of university. It's not. But, yet again, there's more to it than this. But what does this do is generate capital in multiple streams. So I'm linking to this. So I don't think the corporate university loves science as narrowly understood. I don't think, if poetry, okay, was a money generator, you wouldn't have Euromove, you'd have Europoet, you know, and that's what would do it. So you have to think, I mean, here's the reality and the rational kind of truth of economic efficiencies are, because for various reasons, science, in a very narrow understanding of science, is what is perceived as being the cash cow for large universities. That is what's privileged within large universities. Now, that's a reality that is difficult to take for someone who considers themselves, I'm a cultural studies humanities scholar. That's what I do. I've got some grant funding, but it's probably, Benoit would spend that in, 3 days, 3 hours, I don't know. what I've accrued in my whole career, and I've been, somewhat reasonably successful. But if we do this, the triumph of science, I think, within the university and within kinesiology more generally, narrows the project of the university to provide holistic learning and understanding, and the project of kinesiology to provide holistic learning and understanding. So this is my point, and I think perhaps Sputnik. I know. I can't do this now, but Sputnik was all about the scientization of American education post-1960, post-Sputnik, was as a response to a politico-military conflict. We can't let those Russians get to the moon first. What are we doing? We're useless, And interestingly, it also manifests itself in physical education, because Russians were perceived as more rugged, more masculine. We better just sort out these American men. They're unfit, and there was the American Council, the President's Council for Fitness was set up by John F. Kennedy as a kind of a response to Russian perceived physical prowess, and the scientization of the American university was prompted again by their seemingly scientific prowess. But we're in a different moment, and within the economic rationalities of knowledge production are going on within that, the moment of the corporate university. So, in short, and here we go, science, and I'm not hung up, I am hung up with the word science, as Brian has pointed out to me, but it's not science per se, because I think many of my colleagues would acknowledge that the science that is privileged within the university is a very, very narrow definition, and are not particularly progressive or innovative or way of thinking about science. It tends to be very replicative and duplicative. It's not pushing the boundaries of knowledge, it's generating more and more federal grant dollars. So, you know, scientists, I'm not the only one kind of making this claim, they're of course the important revenue streams. This is our new engineering building, you know, it's not bad, you know, and it's an important revenue stream for these reasons. Federal and private funding agencies, endowments, consultancies, and patented innovations. This is what you've got to do as a scientist now. You know, this is what they're told. I just switch off at that point in the meeting. You've got to get a patent and you've got to start making money because we'll cream off a percentage of it. Is that right? I mean, the university owns part of the patent. Is that right here? Is that true? That's true in France. Well, you know. And so the gold standard, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but for funding agencies, federal and non-federal, and for internal monies given for funding, for research, the gold standard of science is the randomised experimental design, hopefully double-blind randomised experimental design. Is that right? Mm-hmm. That's what we're told. If you're doing that, good chance. You're going to get big money, you're going to get value for it. If you don't do that, if you mess around with that airy-fairy, qualitative, interpretive nonsense, don't even bother. You're not going to get anywhere. This is effectively the underpinning of what some people are told, including myself. So that's what high-quality science is, and if you don't do that, and I would suggest that even some of our exercise physiologists or cognitive motor neuroscientists have to kind of prove themselves as scientists in different surroundings, you know, because their science or how they do science may be questioned accordingly. And so, as Norm Denzin says here, critical and reflexive forms of intellectualizing are coming in under increasing pressure for their very existence. They don't generate money. They're critical. They're reflexive. They're qualitative in the way that they empirically engage the world. They don't generate predictive findings, they tend to generate interpretive understandings. So this is, in short, not as marketable and not as valuable in the corporate university marketplace. So they're under pressure. I saw history and geography in the same building, right? Mm-hmm. I like the building actually. Then I saw engineering, I didn't see it. I saw physics was miles bigger. You know, physics and chemistry, do they share a building?
No, it's different.
Yeah, it's a different building. History and geography share one. So, I mean, we can see these hierarchies that have been built and institutionalised over time, if you like. And there are many problems with this. And I think a big one, if we're all Democrats, I don't know if we're all Democrats, but if we want to live in a functioning democracy, do we not have to educate a literate citizenry? And if we don't provide them with a holistic, well-rounded education, you're not going to have a critical and informed democracy. It's not going to work. You're going to have people who are, you know, sleepwalking through a neoliberal revolution. So, you know, yes, science is great, it creates more money, but what does it do in terms of its broader ramifications if that's all we do, or if that's what we focus on, to the detriment of other things? So, if you like, Alan Ingham, the late Alan Ingham, who is a good friend of mine and whose work, I think, was 30 years ahead of its time, acknowledged this, that there was a schism, a fracture between the technological intelligentsia, those doing a particular understanding of science, and humanistic intellectuals. And within kinesiology, and I know within your programme, that is privileged over that. Without a shadow of a doubt. Within my programme, the same. I think within virtually every programme that I can mention, that I can think of, these aren't looked upon as being equals. There's a hierarchy between them. One way of knowing is undoubtedly valued more than the other. And I'm not going to go, this is how he divides the two, blah, 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 but it's just basically what I've characterised previously. And I'm not going to talk about that. It's talking about the corporate university's ultimate conservatism, it's not political conservatism, I'm saying it reproduces the status quo because there's no avenue, there's no site for critical and reflective research to challenge the status quo. So it gets quite simply and quite nicely and quite effectively reproduced. Now, what comes out of this, in my opinion, is this, kinesiology. Now, do we have, I'm loving it here as the byline for, the tagline. I'm not loving kinesiology. I quite like McDonald's actually, but I'm not loving kinesiology. And I think kinesiology is the outgrowth, if you like, of the corporate university. It's what has been dialectically produced by these external forces that have shaped, there's not people in there, my head of department isn't going, but kinesiology, that's the way of the future. They've got pressures on them going, we've got to do this, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. Yeah, we'd love to get a philosophy professor, but yeah, come on, be realistic. This is the type of way that kinesiology comes to pass. So, I use the term coming out of George Ritz's work on McDonaldization. He's bringing Max Weber together with the Golden Arches, quite literally. And he's arguing, this is Ritz's work, that more and more sectors of American life are becoming like the principles of the fast food restaurant are becoming to dominate more and more sectors of American life. So sport's been McDonaldized, education's been McDonaldized. And I'm arguing, and these are the elements that he talks about, that in McDonald's, I could go into this in detail, but it's all about efficiency, predictability. Chicken McNuggets, they're the same everywhere. That's what they want. They're not, but they want them to try and be the same. There's control. There's very stringent ways of doing things, regulations, rules. Don't flick the flies like that. Do them like this. Calculability, everything. It's a huge business. It's reduced to the minus forms of economic rationality and calculability. And in that way, it's a hugely economically efficient model. And McDonaldization is creating that at the university. And inefficiencies, no time for inefficiencies, thanks. And I think US kinesiology is a microcosm, a prophetic microcosm, if you like, of the McDonaldized corporate university. It looks quite, I couldn't find the right font, but that's as near as I could get it. And given more time, I would go through each one of those for you and tell you why kinesiology is following, to its detriment, these particular attributes. And I'll give you some just examples of it. I can't remember which one's my water, so it's that one over here, is it? Right. And this is stuff, here's doing less with less. But leaner and meaner was the mantra in the late 90s, was it not? When was Bennett Harrison's book? This is the way we're supposed to, structure our organisations. This is people we're talking about. And when you're talking about being leaner and being meaner, it's affecting life. So that's one thing that's a sideline in a way. But anyway, so in terms of kinesiological leanness, these are some of the things I think that I've observed within our kinesiology world, and perhaps you can see within yours. And I think Edison and Yara, their article was kind of, I produced a piece here, and they did it much more kind of empirically grounded. Mine was another polemic. But they grounded this in the empirical example of Brazil. And everything I'm talking about, they have documented is happening within this country. And I say the inconvenient truth that we've privileged narrow science in kinesiology to our detriment, they talk about in a much more seductive way, if you like, is the fatal attraction to biodynamics. We're attracted to it for very good reasons. This speaks, money talks, but it's a fatal attraction because it's not doing us any good, we would argue, in the long term, as a field and as a society. So, and I should say, that is not to say science is bad, right? I'm not saying that, we need cognitive neurosciences, exercise physiologists, psychologists of, motor behaviour, whatever it is. We need those people. They're contributing in numerous significant ways. But we need those as well as, not only. That's my point. So, why has this emerged? Thank you very much. Thank you. Because, and I'll go up to a comment. All right. So I'm worried about the time, economic time is money. Your money, no. So, let's face it, if we're talking about kinesiology, and I'm thinking, and I'm a person on the street, what's the best way of understanding the human body in motion? And intuitively, you would think, well, biology, that's it. It's kind of a biological science, anatomy and all that, to know how the body moves. And of course, that's one dimension, it's a vital dimension, and the cognitive elements of it. I don't know if they'd get straight to the cognitive elements. I think they'd go straight to the biological. No? Yeah. So natural science seems to have a more kind of an easier truth of the body. It seems there's the truth. The best truth to the body is through the natural sciences. This is the argument that Fraser and Greco make, and it's commonplace. And so I don't know why I picked this one, I guess, but it's Pepe Contreras-Vidal. Does anyone know him? Doing great work, great scientist, privileged, and rightly so for doing great work. But it's a way, if you like, that doesn't really, no, it does. But this is the kind of image, the imagery of kinesiology that is kind of gives us the natural truths of the body, perhaps. And when people are asked, that was me a few years ago. Dr. Steve. So my old head of department, when they used to go up for graduation, and she said the key fundamental piece of knowledge about kinesiology is what is a motor unit. And I've got no bloody idea what a motor unit is. And I care, because it's something important, but that, if you imagine, so she asks every graduate, she goes, before she gives them the thing, what's a motor unit? And they look at her and what are you saying? Like that. They think she's, crazy. But she's trying to make a point. That is the core knowledge. That's the natural truth that you should get. She doesn't say, well, what do you think the relationship between muscle and what's the socio-cultural constitution of muscle? Think about it. Should they, that is in the hierarchy of her knowledges. Not even in the top 20. Oh, well, I don't know. So what I'm trying to argue is the biophysical constitution of the body is privileged in our curriculum, in our everyday speech, in everything we do within kinesiology, over the socio-cultural constitution. And you might think, but if you've got a body and you've got motor units, whatever they may be, the environment, the social and cultural and political and technological environment in which you locate it are oftentimes the triggers that enable or constrain you to use those motor units in a particular way, to prefer to do this over that. I might be a woman, and I might think that a six-pack is beyond me because it's, I'm told that that's what a man should aspire to, because a woman shouldn't look that muscly, so it doesn't become in my realm of motor unit usage. There are socio-cultural implications for the way that embodiment is enacted and performed and created and recreated. But, and I don't know about your departments, but we tend to privilege that over that. So, scientific discourse and common sense combine to naturalise truth about the body as being biological truth. Thereby obscuring and devaluing, the socio-cultural, political, economic, technological dimensions of it. And I'm arguing that there are multiple truths of active embodiment. Some of them are cognitive neuroscience, some of them are anatomical, and some of them are societal or cultural. And what we should do, surely, is, and we don't do this, is try and link them all together. Because there are linkages, we haven't thought through them, and I haven't thought through them. All I'm doing is kind of fighting, to be heard to some degree. So, here's the kinesiological dialectic. The active body is simultaneously physical, cognitive and social, and needs to be addressed as such. Because we all share genetically endowed bodies, this is Ingham again, but we need to try and understand how here he is he linking things here? Genetically endowed is socially constituted or socially constructed, as well as socially constituted and constructed. You can read it. It's trying to tell us that our genetic endowments, physically or cognitively, operate, and isn't this what sociobiology does? Within a particular environment. I mean, it's a social, a broad and complex environment. And so let's see not only how the environment shapes our bodies, but how our bodies acting in that environment helps to recreate and reconstitute the environment in which they're operating and acting. So, the second part of kinesiological leanness is this. And we know curricular efficiency based on epistemological and economic rationalities. The Berkeley solution. Berkeley had the Department of, was it kinesiology?
Biodynamics.
What, was it biodynamics?
Or biodynamics.
Wasn't there sport in there somewhere?
But they're no longer.
Well, now isn't it integrated biology? So, you can do that. And in many ways, I feel, look, just kick me over to sociology and me and George Ritzer will, McDonaldize everything, But we've got a commitment to movement, right? And that's what keeps us in kinesiology. I don't want my kinesiology department to go down the line of integrated biology or to go down the line of University of Washington where they just shut the whole lot. And I don't think that's good for the field. And another way that we're treated rather strangely, this is really getting a bit. But this is something somebody said to me relatively recently, and they go, "You're a sociologist. You're not going to generate grant funding. So you're valued into the department. Well, but you're a good teacher, and so you can teach. That's what you do. So can I go?" So the research I do is secondary because I'm here to allow you the time to do your research, so I'll be a teaching mule. Is that it? Again, damned with fake managerialist plays. My role to the department is as teacher. And of course I told them what to do with that particular viewpoint, and I said, you've got a privilege, everybody's researching, not just people who generate grant funding. Anyway, and a corollary of that is that sociology and cultural studies in my department has a huge fight to get positions, okay, but less of a fight to get temporary lecturers in to do our teaching. Temporary lecturers aren't going to be generating much research because they're teaching 4 classes. And so this is where jobs, where you have to teach 4 or 5 jobs just to have 4 or 5 jobs, equates to MOOC professors. Terrible working conditions, working 4 or 5, maybe 2 or 3 different institutions, people with PhDs whose value isn't viewed upon as researchers or as future researchers. They're just doing the donkey work for the professoriates. Now I'm lucky I'm part of the professoriates, but we're told we had 4,000 professors in 1990, now we've got 2,500. Why? Because we've got MOOC professors doing the dirty work, quite literally. And most of those, I would argue, are in non-grant generating areas, where, as a result, as a corollary, the research dries up, therefore providing less justification for their existence as well. Anyway, Another form of epistemological control is kinesiological leanness. As I said, science is the first positive assumption that science is the best way of viewing all forms of human experiences as patinadas. And it's, no, I don't think anyone would believe that, but some people do. And as a result of that, we have, we talked about kinesiology and control. And I'm a visiting professor at Bath. We have this off camera, I guess. And a friend of mine who's at Bath, and Brian, maybe you can speak to this, about performance management. And they're told, they have committees that guide individual researchers to tell them what they should be researching and what areas are most appropriate for what they should be doing. In terms of funded research, of course, and it's got to have demonstrable economic impact and demonstrable social impact. Now, I'd like to know, any of you, you've got some great scientists in this room, that could show me that with any degree of sincerity, that they can demonstrate the social impact that they've had on their research. So I think this is a worrying model and a worrying kind of form of control over, academic freedom. And I'll give you and I don't like Michigan, I have to say. I don't know why, because Illinois and Michigan are supposedly rivals, but they look upon us as Illinois as nobody, so I've always been rather resentful towards them. But I went for a job there once, and I didn't go for a job. I was a finalist at Michigan, and they interviewed the two finalists by phone. I thought that's economic rationality taken to the extreme. And then I didn't get it, and I was gutted, absolutely gutted. But a friend of mine got it, and he got there, and about 3 months later he said, you dodged a bullet on this one. So you missed. And the reason being, he said, when I got up for tenure, half of his papers would have to be quantitatively based, statistically based papers. And we're talking here about a historian of sport, race and ethnicity. And guess what? He didn't get tenure. And so I kind of went, and there you go. That's what you're told. So performance management is, and they've probably got the best intentions, guiding, privileging particular ways of knowing. Well, I've got a couple more, and I'll just talk about meanness. Because I think kinesiology is a little bit mean, right? And the meanness comes in because any overtly rationalising system tends to dehumanise us as individuals. It takes, as Ritzer says, the enchantment out of life. We become disenchanted because our lives are so routinized. If you've ever worked in McDonald's, I bet you became pretty disenchanted and dehumanized pretty soon because you're pressing buttons, doing things, not doing it quick enough, do it quicker. So the irrationality of it is, of this supposed social advancement, is it creates that. And as a side, and I'm going to throw this one out there, because I have a bit of an issue with this, and I'd like it to be discussed at some point in time. In my department, there is, I don't think we've got bloodthirsty, Rambos as professors. They're going after the dollar. They're going after the research dollar. And a lot of research dollars comes from the federal government or the military to improve your shooting technique under stress. And so you get one of those cognitive neuroscience things. So effectively you become a better killer. That's what we're teaching. Or that's the research that we generate. And I know it has knock-on effects for other forms of working under stress, but that's what it's being funded by, and we're in a school of public health. The general betterment. Anyway, it's just a side. So, more importantly, I think it leads to this: epistemological and ontological dehumanisation. And what I've characterised kinesiology as being is this bioscientific reductionism. Is irrational. It only gives us a slice of what human movement is. So it's an irrational practice. Let's give it the whole lot so we can see, the the moving body in the round ontologically, not a slice of it. And so I'm saying naive over-specialisation leads to partial knowledges and understandings, not only in my department, but I think in the field in general. And I think public health has shown us the way. And I don't think a lot of public health research, but this model that they're pushing in our school, it goes from the genomic to the global, and this is the kind of the upstream, downstream level of human action that incorporates all these within this lifetime axis, or this lifetime chart. So we're interacting between these various levels: global, macro, meso, micro, group, family, work sites, nation states, geopolitical. Things we virtually ignore when we're looking at activity, but we don't ignore multi-organ systems, cellular level, subcellular molecular level, and genomic substrata. They're saying you've got to take those in the round. And I would argue, in not doing that, we're rolling with a neoliberal revolution, because what we're doing is we're reproducing kinesiological individualism. We're reducing everything to the individual body, the truths of the individual body, which are socially, contextualised, but we don't get to those. So Ingham came up with this 20, 30 years ago, that healthization is what we are reproducing, effectively. Sorry, it's my last point. And he said that bioscientific individualism, that's what we're pushing, does this. We tend to have these tendencies of behaviourism, empiricism and voluntarism, and we produce discrete responses to holistic problems. Even, they do some great work in my department on Parkinson's disease, and stroke victims. But stroke victims live in society. Stroke victims have to kind of rehabilitate within the family, or not within the family, within a particular class location, easier or harder. So, I think that he's right there. Discrete responses to holistic problems don't solve the problem in the whole. We tinker with biological and psychodynamic individual rather than the socio-economic and political structures with which it's located. So, healthism is effectively an abstracted individualist understanding of the body. It's taking it out of its context and tinkering in discrete ways rather than looking at it holistically. And this is where public health, I think, is rather naive, because healthism is the dominant way of thinking about diet, preventative healthcare, physical activity, substance abuse, risk behaviour. A lot of people, apart from the new wave of social epidemiologists, look at physical activity as an intervention. They go, all right, it's like, you intervene, you provide someone with the social, the skills to play, I don't know, soccer or whatever it might be, and then expect them to go and, become this physically active, responsible, holistic, moralistic individual, without taking into account the social constraints or enablers that allow them or disallow them from doing so. So, healthism, if you like, doesn't look at context and believes in true neoliberal fashion that anybody can do it. Anybody can do it through individual effort and discipline. We've provided you the mechanisms. Let's move. It's a classic example of this. You can do it. Anybody can be active. Well, it's not as simple as that, and that's what we need to recognise. And I think this is 3 slides left. This is Ingham's kind of parting shot. Was by doing so, our researchers in kinesiology, their role in life is to better society. None of them are in there because they've got a kind of it's a vocation to improve the societies in which we live. But I think, and he says, wittingly, I don't think they do it wittingly, they do it unwittingly by focusing on these discrete, tinkering with minute studies that don't understand physical activity in the whole. They can support the new right and right-thinking ideologies that immiserate the lifestyles of the poor by not understanding the constraints that disallow people to get involved, become active, become fit, become not obese, as the big buzzword is. So it gets back to that issue of responsibilitization and moralistic judgment that is generated unwittingly by kinesiological science, if it isn't presented in a very careful way. So this is what I'm saying. This is what we look upon. This is the individualizing of movement that is reinforcing the neoliberal agenda under which we're living. And this is why I'm arguing we're not only sleepwalking through the neoliberal revolution, to some degree, and unwittingly, I think we're corroborating it. Okay, it's 45 minutes or so, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Ok, vamos direto para as questões, nós temos um tempo, 15 minutos.
It's really interesting. I resonate with a lot of the ideas. I was wondering if, let's say, if one looked at the research in the 40s and 50s and 60s, 1940s, 50s and 60s, when the view of the role of who we are as a society was perhaps different than what you're claiming now. Was the research any different, though, than what was called phys ed? I mean...
I can't answer that question. I can answer a different question.
I don't know the answer either, I'm just wondering.
I've got a doctoral student at the moment who's doing quite an interesting discourse analysis of the way that physical activity and recreation from actually the 1950s onwards was talked about within Baltimore local governments, and the funding decisions that were made to justify either improving physical activity resources or retrenching, bringing them back in. And I think that there is a very definite shift that is pretty evident. It doesn't happen, Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan don't get into power and then everyone's going, well, it's all about individualism, there's a moralistic agenda. But there's a lag. By the early 90s, that's the dominant ideology that is kind of talked about almost naturally, unquestioningly. And that's very different from the 50s and 60s, whether there was a much more social welfare commitment to the benefits of physical activity for communities. So that doesn't answer your question at all, but I would imagine that kinesiology isn't an island, and it's I would suggest that it would to a large degree imitate the ideologies of the moment. But that would be an interesting project for someone to do.
Right. What about religion and religious beliefs in the growth of neoliberalism, particularly in the States, when you have fundamentalist intelligent design rather than theory of evolution, creationism?
Right.
They must be quite formative in people's thinking in the way that you can take it. And maybe even driving this neoliberal revolution to some extent.
Say that last bit again.
Maybe these fundamentalists have beliefs in religion and the power of religion are in fact one of the main drivers, could be one of the main drivers in what we refer to as neoliberal revolution.
I think so. I think that there is it's a very complex kind of political structure, but and this is kind of pre-Tea Party, really. I don't know if you know but if we're looking about the relationship between neoconservatism and its moralist religious underpinnings and neoliberalism, there's definitely a relationship there. but where I think many ultra fundamental neoconservatives, they differ in certain elements of kind of neoliberalism, neoliberal assumptions that they're probably not even aware of. So, you know, Milton Friedman wouldn't be, in any way, wouldn't be a fundamentalist Christian anyway, but I think there's definitely a relationship, yes, and I don't think that's been looked at all either. And the attitude of the body within those religious groups, I think, has been done, but not as it relates to, say, the obesity crisis, crisis of inverted commas. But again,
enjoyed the challenging talk. One of the things that was interesting, the undercurrent, kind of answering almost the question that we've been asking this whole week, is that you seem to refer to kinesiologists as them. So my question is there a place in kinesiology for social science? And if not, is there a need for another term?
No, I totally think there is. I didn't mean. When Harry was talking about it yesterday, I had an epiphany. Because when I was 25, 30, even 35, I wanted to be a sociologist. I wanted to be in cultural studies, and I wanted to define myself by that field. But then I came to realise that, no, I am a kinesiologist. I'm a kinesiologist every bit as much as the rest of you. And I value and I view what we do in physical cultural studies, which I wish, given another hour, I could have told you what we actually do. Because I think what I don't mention is part of the reason that this has happened, sociology and history and philosophy have been fallen by the wayside, is because the research that has been produced in it over 30 years has been banal, trivia. And it needs to be, we need to kind of wake up and go, we need to do work that is kind of not only can contribute in the way we want to, but further legitimise what we do in the way we want to do it. And I think it's, I'm as guilty as the next person of doing that, but, if we want to exist and contribute and make kinesiology better, it's not only your responsibility, it's ours as well. And I think we often fall behind, and I'm not saying, woe is me, we're kind of downtrodden this. We're downtrodden, and devalued, partly because of the context, but partly because of our lack of stepping up to doing the right type of work. And I don't mean, following the scientific mantra, but doing work that is I would argue, more meaningful. And that's beginning to happen, is it not? But it's been a slow process. I mean, I wrote my doctoral dissertation on the racial representation of Michael Jordan. And now, if a student came to me and said that's what he wanted to write, and I'll say, forget it. But my advisor, God rest him, he's not dead, so I shouldn't say God rest his soul, but my advisor said, no, you're not doing that. I really honestly believe that. But in 1991, I think we were trying to kind of justify myself and my credibility within cultural studies rather than making a statement and pushing the boundaries of kinesiology in the social and cultural dimensions. If we were better, it wouldn't be easy to squash us as we've been squashed. Anyone else?
If I may, very interesting your lecture. One of the things that come up to my mind now is like if we had a more, rather than have a multidisciplinary approach, like for example concerning kinesiology and all the disciplines that are put together, but they're put together in a multidisciplinary approach rather than a cross-disciplinary or interdisciplinary approach.
Right.
So this may explain maybe the type of research that only deals with, for example, physiology and it's not concerned with the obstacles you're pointing out. For example, social problems, poverty, and stuff.
Right.
So maybe one of the things we could go over, like going for more interdisciplinary approach.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I think it's more than interdisciplinarity. There's extra, anti, and transdisciplinarity. I know there's kind of slight differences, and I think we have to kind of develop. We have to shed these disciplinary kind of baggage as we engage in empirical problem, poverty. You know, I won't say obesity again because that's just the mantra of every. But you know, we shed those. We come together as a collective to try and understand a particular problem in a holistic manner, and that hasn't been done because we do multidisciplinary work. But here comes a physiologist. There comes the psychologist, and they do their little thing, and they try and weave it together, but it's clunky. It doesn't really work because they haven't got to that higher level of thinking that really integrates, you know, beyond disciplinary affiliation or disciplinary baggage, as I say. I think it would be great to do. I think it's hugely difficult, but you know, if the best people can't do it, why not? You know, they should be. Then why should do? I mean, I'm sure you do.
Actually, you know, I mean, I would like to make a comment after that. I mean, it's a question, it's not a comment. I think I'm sympathetic with what you're saying. I think I agree with 99%. 99%.
Right.
I mean, I'm absolutely serious, and I do some cultural heritage studies in movement, looking at, you know, how culture is constraining and influencing the way we move, looking at traditional Japanese dance, for instance, in the Shimane Prefecture. We had discussion with the other day, this week, trying to figure out how, you know, we can do what you propose. That is to say, if you want to look at the cultural constraint on genes, social constraint on muscle contraction, exactly the type of example that we've been showing today. How do we do that? At what stage in our career, you know, we can find the freedom to do this kind of work together? And I think this is really where the heart of kinesiology should reside, and this is not what we have. And I'm going to go back to that issue tomorrow on a very closer topic. So I think I can make the following question. I can ask the following question: why do I feel guilty? If you go back 2 slides back here, you know, the fact that natural science, this one here.
Yeah.
So the fact that it is half true, you know, doesn't mean that, you know, it is not important, that, you know, it is not a way to go. But when I hear you talk, I feel guilty. So why do I feel guilty?
I'd throw that back at you. I'd ask you, well, why do you feel guilty? No, I think you may be misconstrued. I mean, I'm giving I am. This is my life, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? I'm trying to kind of justify. But when I say half truths here, it doesn't mean that these are half truth. You're only giving us half of the story. Maybe that's the wrong thing, and maybe I'm. Why do you feel guilty? I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. I'm just trying to make people value the other side of the coin, value other ways of knowing, and appreciate. I have got no hierarchy, no epistemological or ontological hierarchies. I think that we have to have a kind of holistic understanding, epistemologically and ontologically, to get the truth, to get a better understanding of the truth, rather than just half the truth.
Yeah.
If I made you feel guilty, I'm sorry.
Oh no, I mean, I'm absolutely happy with that emotion of feeling guilty. That's okay with me. Let's push that a little bit.
I feel guilty as well, to be quite honest, because I can talk it, you know. And in the last 5 years, I've started to do it a bit more, and I've wasted 10 years, or I've been sleepwalking through as well, which is even worse for me.
Yeah.
So sorry.
Let me play devil's advocate for 45 seconds, in that I don't think it's the fault of the person who studies the motor units. that he or she is obligated to place the motor unit within the context of society. But, and you just said it now, I think it's we need to make sure that kinesiology has scholars in kinesiology that can take knowledge at various levels and then show us what you might call the larger picture is. And I see that as your challenge to yourself rather than the challenge to the motor unit researcher to try to explain everything. And so
I don't think the motor unit person should. I'm not asking them to do that. I'm asking them to value. I'm asking that person when they're on giving away their scrolls. One person they'll say, "What's a motor unit?" The next person they'll say, "What's the social constitution of muscle?" The next one would be, what is cognitive motor neuroscience? So it wouldn't privilege. We all recognise the value of each, and I think in our undergraduate programme, our undergraduates get a better sense of kinesiology in the round through 7 core courses: sociology, history, motor control, motor learning, exercise physiology, and biomechanics. They get a better understanding of it than our faculty has got, and our grad students, because they're off in their own fragmented worlds. Yeah. But if we taught the programme correctly, they'd have a better understanding of the round. So
I think that you have a great program now, no?
Mm. Well, we're changing it, so but we're thinking about it. We were going to change it, and then they looked at it and said, "Well, we really need to change this." So it's not perfect by any means.
Ok? Bom, se Brian nos ensinou alguma coisa hoje, é que a gente tem que sentar junto e conversar. Ele terminou a fala dele de diplomacia. E acho que o Andrew David disse a mesma coisa agora. Não queremos ser mais do que ninguém, queremos ser iguais. Eu acho que esse é um bom momento para nós pararmos, irmos para casa e refletirmos. Boa noite. Amanhã.
E o jogo de futebol?
Nós vamos...
Football, soccer, now?
We are going to unfortunately, we are going to see São Paulo. But fortunately, Fluminense will be there too.